You're just dead weight, you know. Always hovering, always needing something. I froze, the Tupperware of homemade food a dead weight in my trembling hands. The world around me seemed to slow, each beat of my heart an eternity. Riley stood inches away, her 20 years radiating a coldness I'd never seen. Behind her, muffled laughter drifted from friends I didn't even recognize. A private world I wasn't part of. I swallowed, a knot tightening in my throat. My Riley. The little girl I'd rocked to sleep, taught to read, comforted after her first bike fall. She saw me as a burden. Me. I'm sorry, I whispered, holding out the container, unable to meet her eyes. Just thought you might need food during finals. She snatched the container with an impatient sigh, like a charity handout. No thank you. No automatic kiss. Just a quick, dismissive glance back at her friends, as if I were an embarrassing interruption. Gotta get back to my study group, she said, already closing the door. I stood there, staring at the closed door, the silence deafening. At 67, I thought I'd known every kind of pain. I was wrong. This was new. You must be wondering how we got to this point. How my granddaughter, my darling, the one who called my snickerdoodles magical, now saw me as dead weight. Let me tell you how it all started. My name is Deborah, and life never came wrapped in a pretty bow. Frank, my husband, died of a sudden heart attack at 42. Left me with 3 kids, Brian, 15, Clara, 12, Edward, just 9. No time to grieve. The day after the funeral, I was already organizing our new life. I took a second job as a night cleaner, on top of my day as an office assistant. 4, maybe 5 hours of sleep, tops. My hands cracked from the chemicals, but I'd rub on cheap lotion and keep going. No other choice. Mom, you're killing yourself, Brian, already a teenager, would say, wanting to quit school to work. Don't you dare! I'd snap back, firm like only a desperate mother can be. Your father dreamed of seeing you all graduate, and that's what's going to happen. And it did. With immense sacrifice, I saw all 3 of my kids get their degrees. Brian graduated with a business degree and quickly landed a good job. He was the first to get married, to Stephanie, a well-mannered girl from a good family. When they told me they were expecting a baby, I cried tears of joy. I was going to be a grandma. A new, sweeter phase of life, I thought. Riley, born in the spring, tiny and perfect. The moment I held her, I made a silent vow. I'd be the best grandma in the world, and I tried. When Stephanie needed to go back to work, I offered to watch my granddaughter 3 times a week. Are you sure, Deborah? Stephanie asked, concerned. You've worked so hard your whole life. Taking care of my granddaughter isn't work, I replied, already setting up a little corner of my apartment with toys and children's books. Years went by. I'd pick Riley up from school, prepare special snacks, help with her homework. On weekends, she'd sleep over. We'd tell stories, bake snickerdoodles, the ones she loved so much. Grandma, your cookies are magic, she'd say, eyes sparkling, fingers sticky with sugar and cinnamon. Secret ingredients love, Riles, I'd reply, etching every smile into my memory. When Riley turned 10, already retired, I started picking her up from school almost every day. Brian and Stephanie worked a lot, building their careers, and I was happy to be useful. My small apartment in the suburbs would fill with life when she arrived, tossing her backpack on the couch and spilling out the day's news. Grandma, I got an A in math today. Grandma, the teacher said my essay was the best in the class. Grandma, can I invite Julia over to study tomorrow? Every one of her achievements felt like my own. Every smile, a gift. When she started winning school awards, I'd go to all the ceremonies, sitting in the front row, clapping until my hands hurt. Around 13, the first changes. Normal teenage stuff, I told myself. More time on her phone, less talking. Spontaneous hugs grew rarer. The "I love you, Grandma," before bed, almost extinct. "It's just a phase," Clara, my daughter, would say when I mentioned it. "All teenagers pull away a bit. It'll come back." I believed her. I kept baking snickerdoodles, even when she barely touched them. Kept saving for special gifts, even when the thank yous were rushed. Kept reserving weekends, even when she canceled last minute. "Sorry, Grandma. A group project came up." "Can't make it today, Grandma. I need to study for a test." "Next week, I promise I'll come, Grandma." At 17, Riley got into medical school. First place. My heart nearly burst. I insisted on helping with supplies, tightening my retired budget. Cut cable, skipped bingo, bought only store brand. It wasn't sacrifice. It was an investment in my granddaughter. When Riley moved into a small apartment near campus, I helped her decorate. I sewed curtains, bought plants to brighten the place, filled her fridge with frozen meals I'd prepped for a week. "Thanks, Grandma," she said, giving me a quick hug. "But you didn't have to do all that." For the first few months, I called every day. Then I realized I was bothering her. I started calling 3 times a week. Then, just on Sundays. The conversations grew shorter, more superficial. "How are your studies going, Riles?" "Fine, Grandma. Lots of reading." "Are you eating right?" "Yeah, Grandma. I gotta go now. I need to study." 3 months ago, I noticed Riley was colder. At the monthly family gatherings at Brian's house, she barely exchanged words with me. She'd sit far away, always glued to her phone. When I asked if everything was okay, I'd only get short answers. "Everything's fine, Grandma. Just busy." But my grandma heart knew something was wrong. I felt it in the air, that cold dread only a grandmother's heart knows. I mentioned it to Brian, who just brushed it off. "Mom, med school is tough. Give her some space." I tried to give her that space. I stopped calling on Sundays, hoping she'd miss me and call. She didn't. I sent casual texts, just to show I was thinking of her. The replies, when they came, were short. "Thanks, Grandma. Love you too. I'll call you later." That later never came. It never does. Last week, I couldn't take it anymore. I heard from Stephanie that Riley was in the middle of final exams. I prepared her favorite meal: fluffy rice, seasoned black beans, roasted chicken with potatoes, savory dressing, sautéed collard greens. And for dessert, butterscotch pudding, her childhood favorite. I packed everything with care, put it in a pretty bag I saved for special occasions. I took 2 buses to get to her building. I climbed 4 flights, the elevator out. At 67 with arthritic knees, it was a climb. But the thought of her smile, of her getting a home-cooked meal, pushed me on. When I rang the doorbell, I heard voices inside, laughter. I smoothed my hair, ran my hand over my dress to straighten it out. I wanted to look presentable. The door opened, and there was Riley, my granddaughter. Her hair in a messy bun, reading glasses perched on her nose, a pen tucked behind her ear. For a fleeting second, I saw the little girl who'd run into my arms. Then the moment shattered. Her smile vanished. "Grandma, what are you doing here?" And that's how we got to that moment. To the words I never thought I'd hear. To a pain I never imagined. You're just dead weight, you know? Always hovering. always needing something. I went home a ghost, into my silent apartment, purse on the rack, shoes off. I sank into the old armchair. No lights, no TV, just the dark, trying to comprehend how love could curdle into this. Tears came, silent, tracing paths down the wrinkled face that had known so many kisses from that very girl. I cried for hours, until the well ran dry. Then I rose, took a hot shower, pulled on my oldest, softest pajamas, and lay down. The next day I woke up with my body aching, and my soul even more so. I made coffee, strong like I always liked it, and sat at the kitchen table. The same table where Riley used to do her homework, where she'd draw, where she'd eat the snickerdoodles she loved so much. The phone rang. It was Brian. "Mom, everything okay? I called last night, but you didn't answer." "I was tired, son. Went to bed early." My voice came out normal, controlled. Years of practice hiding worries from my kids. "You sound off. Is something wrong?" "No, son. Just a rough night's sleep." I didn't tell him. What grandmother admits her granddaughter sees her as a burden? What grandmother causes a rift between father and daughter? I swallowed the pain, as I had so many other hurts in my life. In the days that followed, I couldn't eat right. Breakfast was just half a slice of buttered toast and a cup of coffee. For lunch, I'd pick at a little rice, a spoonful of beans. Dinner? I didn't even try anymore. 6 pounds melted off me in a week. Brian called twice more. I pretended everything was fine. Clara invited me for Sunday lunch. I made up a backache to avoid going. Edward, who lives out of town, texted asking if I wanted him to visit next holiday. I told him not to bother, that I was perfectly fine. I lied to everyone. I smiled at the neighbor in the elevator. I chatted about the weather with the doorman. I thanked the grocery delivery guy. On the outside, I was the same Deborah everyone knew. But inside, an emptiness grew, consuming me. At night, lying in bed, I replayed every moment with Riley. Where had I gone wrong? Had I been too overprotective, too intrusive, too controlling? I tried to remember every conversation, every piece of advice, every moment we'd shared. Had I, without knowing, become her dead weight? On Saturday night, a week after the incident, I picked up the phone to call her. I dialed the first few numbers, hung up, 3 times. On the 4th, I let it ring. 1 ring, 2, 3. "Hello?" Her voice, serious, distant. I hung up without saying a word. Coward, I thought. After everything, I couldn't even speak to my own granddaughter. That night, I dreamt of Frank. We were young again, sitting on the bench in the park where we first met. He held my hand and smiled that way that always made my heart race. "You did everything right, Deborah," he said. "You gave all your love. Don't blame yourself for what you can't control." I woke up with my face wet with tears, but strangely lighter. On Sunday morning, I got up early. I took a long shower, washed my hair, put cream on my dry hands. I put on my blue robe, the one Clara gave me last Christmas. I made a simple breakfast: toast, cheese, a slice of papaya. I managed to eat almost all of it. I was washing the dishes when the doorbell rang. I looked at the clock. 9:20 in the morning. Who could it be at this hour? I dried my hands on the dish towel, adjusted my still damp hair, and went to answer it. I opened the door still in my robe, hair disheveled, and there stood Riley. My granddaughter looked different. Red eyes, restless hands. She was wearing an old college t-shirt and jeans. No makeup, none of that superior air from last week. She seemed smaller, younger, more vulnerable. "Can I come in, Grandma?" But that's a story for another time. What happened after that Sunday would change our relationship forever. And it would teach me that family love, even when wounded, has an incredible capacity to heal. But it would also show me that some words, once spoken, leave scars that never completely disappear. If I'd known then, standing at the door with my granddaughter in front of me, how much more we'd have to face together, maybe I would have hesitated to let her in. Or maybe not, because deep down, despite everything, she was still my Riley, and I was still her grandma. And that, no matter how complicated it got, would never change. I gestured silently for Riley to come in. She shuffled past, head down, shoulders slumped as if under an invisible weight. How many times had that girl raced through this hallway, filling the house with laughter? Now she moved like a stranger, unsure of her place. "Coffee?" I asked, more from habit than anything. "Sure," she mumbled, sinking into a chair at the kitchen table. That table, where she'd done homework, drawn princesses and dragons, learned to make snickerdoodles. I brewed coffee in silence, her gaze a weight on my back. My hands trembled slightly as I set out the cups, the blue-flowered porcelain she'd always loved. I sat across from her, maintaining a careful distance. I came to apologize," she choked out. "What I said, it was horrible, unforgivable." I remained silent, my trembling hands clasped around my teacup. Steam rose between us, a fragile, translucent curtain. "I've been under so much pressure at college," she continued. "I failed 2 classes, something that's never happened before. I didn't tell anyone, not even my parents. I'm so afraid of disappointing you all after so much sacrifice." Then, something unbelievable. My 20-year-old granddaughter, a woman, began to sob like the 5-year-old who used to run into my arms when she fell. "I took it out on you because I knew you loved me unconditionally. It was easier to push you away than to admit I was failing." Her words hung heavy, leaden, between us. I wanted to say it was okay, to forgive everything, as I always had. But something inside me had shifted. Her words, dead weight, still echoed, a raw wound. "Riley," I began, my voice steadier than I expected. "What you said, it cut me deep." She looked up, surprised. She expected the automatic forgiveness, the grandma who always smoothed things over. I spent the entire week wondering where I went wrong, what I did to deserve being called dead weight by the person I love most in this world. "Grandma, I didn't mean—" "Let me finish," I interrupted, surprising us both. "I'm 67, Riley. I buried your grandpa at 42, raised 3 kids alone, worked 2 jobs until my hands bled. Never, not once, have I been a burden to anyone." Tears streamed down my face, but my voice held steady. "When you were born, I promised myself I'd be the best grandma, that you'd never feel the absence your parents, busy building careers, would inevitably leave, that my love would fill every gap, every single one." Riley was openly weeping now, her face buried in her hands. "Maybe that was my mistake," I continued. "Loving too much, being too present, making you believe my love was so guaranteed, so unconditional, that it could be treated as worthless." A heavy silence settled. Through the kitchen window, the morning sun illuminated the table, highlighting the marks of countless meals, conversations, shared moments. "I don't deserve your forgiveness," she whispered, her voice barely there. "But I need you to know, that wasn't real. None of it." Riley then told me everything. How the pressure of medical school had been overwhelming from the start. How she, always the brilliant student, the family's pride, began to feel herself drowning. In the first semester, I still managed to keep up appearances, she explained, wiping her tears. Studied 16 hours a day, slept with textbooks, woke in a panic. But the grades came, and I thought, I'm making it. She told me about the second year, when things started to fall apart. The classes got harder, the competition fiercer. For the first time, Riley wasn't at the top. I started having panic attacks, she confessed. Waking in the middle of the night, unable to breathe. Afraid to sleep, afraid I wouldn't wake in time to study. Afraid to study, afraid I wouldn't learn enough. Afraid of disappointing everyone. As she spoke, I remembered a specific day, when Riley was about 12. She'd gotten a 9. 5 on a math test and came home crying. What's wrong, Riles? I asked, concerned. A 9. 5 is excellent. But it's not a 10, Grandma, she sobbed. I always get a 10. At the time, I thought that was a sign of healthy perfectionism, of ambition. Now sitting across from me, a young woman broken by pressure, I saw it, the first tremor of something deeper. Last semester, Riley continued, I failed physiology and pathology. 2 Fs. Never happened before. Why didn't you tell us? I asked softly. She gave a bitter, humorless laugh. Tell what, Grandma? That the prodigy granddaughter, the one everyone invested so much in, was failing. That maybe medical school was too much for me. That maybe I wasn't as special as everyone thought. Her words hit me like a punch. How many times had I bragged to friends about my granddaughter, the future doctor? My Riley, top of her class in medical school. Without realizing it, I'd placed that weight on her too. I started pulling away from everyone, she continued. First from my friends, then my parents, and finally, from you, the person who supported me the most, who believed in me the most. Why? I asked, though I already knew the answer. You know me better than anyone, Grandma. You always see right through me. I was afraid you'd look in my eyes and see the truth. I was falling apart. I remembered then all the times I tried to call, sent messages, showed up unannounced. It wasn't just longing or affection. It was intuition. On some level, I knew something was wrong. That day, she continued, referring to the day of the terrible phrase, I was studying with some classmates. We were cramming for the makeup exam. I'd been chugging energy drinks, hadn't slept properly in 3 days, when you rang the doorbell. She paused, taking a deep breath. I panicked. There were my classmates, all of them knowing I'd failed, and suddenly my grandma, the person who was proudest of me, showed up at the door. It felt like 2 worlds colliding, the one where I was a complete failure, and the one where I was still perfect, Riley. And you said that to push me away, I stated. Yes, she admitted, her face a mask of shame. The cruelest thing I've ever done. The worst thing I could think of. Something I knew would hurt so much you wouldn't come back. Slowly I rose, feeling the weight of my 67 years, and did something I hadn't done in too long. I pulled my granddaughter into the tightest hug I could muster. Riley, I finally said, you can fail every class in the world, but you will never fail as my granddaughter. Never. She clung to me like she did after nightmares as a child. We cried, tears washing away old hurts, beginning to heal. Want to make cookies? I asked, pulling back, wiping my eyes. She smiled, a genuine one I hadn't seen in years. The cinnamon ones? The magical ones, I confirmed. As we prepared the cookie dough, Riley told me more about her college life, about the demanding professors, the sleepless nights, the patients she saw during her rotations. "Some days I just come home and cry in the shower," she confessed, sifting flour. "So much suffering, so much pain, and I still have to memorize meds, procedures, symptoms." "That's a lot for one person to carry," I commented, measuring the cinnamon. "Last week, a lady your age, Grandma, passed away on my shift," she said, her voice cracking. "I held her hand until the end. She called me her granddaughter, you know. Confused, thought I was her own. I stopped what I was doing and looked at her. No longer the little girl who knew every inch of my house, nor the distant teenager. A young woman facing life and death daily, shouldering enormous expectations, trying not to crumble. When she passed," Riley continued, "I thought of you, of how long it had been since I'd really visited you, of how I was wasting precious moments because of pride, because of fear. And then I showed up with a meal," I finished. "And I said the most horrible thing," she concluded, head bowed. "Spent the whole week thinking about it. Couldn't study, couldn't sleep. Just replayed that moment, seeing your face." We continued working on the dough in silence for a few minutes. The smell of cinnamon began to fill the kitchen, bringing back memories of simpler times. "You know what's funny, Grandma?" she said, almost to herself. "When I was little, I thought you were magic. Knew everything. Could do anything. Nothing could hurt you." I smiled, remembering how she used to look at me with admiration when I solved simple problems, like fixing a broken toy or putting a bandage on a scraped knee. "Growing up is realizing the adults we admire are just as human as we are," I replied, "with fears, insecurities, hearts that can break." "I broke your heart," she stated, a painful realization. "Yes," I admitted, "but hearts can be mended, Riles, especially when there's true love." While the dough rested, we sat in the living room with 2 cups of tea. The silence between us now was different, no longer heavy with unspoken resentment, but with a fragile mutual understanding. "Grandma," Riley began hesitantly, "remember that summer when I went camping with school? I was about 11. "Of course I remember. You came back thinner and with a scraped knee." She smiled, surprised I remembered the details. "I never told you what really happened there," she said. "It was the first time I felt inadequate." Riley then told me about that camp, how the popular girls excluded her, how one of them, Brittany, spread rumors Riley was a know-it-all and no one should talk to her. 3 days I ate alone, Grandma, sat at an empty table while everyone else laughed together. My heart ached. At the time when she came back, I noticed she was different, quieter. I asked if anything had happened, and she just said she was tired from the trip. On the last night, I cried so much my eyes were swollen. In the morning, when we were packing to leave, Brittany came to talk to me. Riley paused, taking a deep breath. She said, "Nobody really likes you, you know? Your parents are only proud of your grades, not of you. If you start getting bad grades, they'll love you less." "Oh, Riles," I murmured, horrified. "The worst part? I believed it, Grandma. 11 years old, and I believed it with all my heart. Came home determined to never, ever get a bad grade. To be perfect, always." "That's why you cried over the 9.5, I finally understood. Yes. Every time I got less than perfect, Brittany's voice echoed, "They'll love you less now." I took her hands in mine, noticing how cold they were despite the warmth of the kitchen. "Riley, look at me," I asked. When her eyes met mine, I continued. Nothing, absolutely nothing, you do or don't do, will change how much we love you. Grades, career, success, none of that matters compared to who you are. And what am I, Grandma? She asked, her voice small. You're the girl who cried over a dead bird in the yard and insisted on a funeral. The girl who gave her lunch to a forgotten classmate. The young woman who held a stranger's hand in her final moments. Silent tears streamed down her face. That's who you are, Riley. Not your grades, not your future degree. Your heart. And it's beautiful, even when it makes mistakes. We went back to the kitchen to finish the cookies. As we cut the dough into small circles, Riley told me about another moment she'd kept to herself. Remember my 15th birthday? The party Mom and Dad threw at their building's community room. Of course. You looked beautiful in that blue dress. That night, after everyone had left, I overheard Mom and Dad talking in the kitchen. They didn't want me to hear, but I stopped behind the door. She paused, placing more cookies on the baking sheet. Dad said, Deborah works herself to the bone helping with Riley. We need to find a way for her to rest more. And Mom replied, but how? She won't accept help, wants to do everything herself. She's too stubborn. I felt my face flush. It was true. I'd always refused help, always insisted on doing more than they asked. At the time, I was confused. Riley continued. I thought, why are they talking about Grandma like that? She loves taking care of me. But over time, I started to wonder if you really enjoyed it, or if you felt obligated. Riley, Let me finish, Grandma, she gently asked. I started to feel like a burden to you too. Like I was stealing your retirement, your well-deserved rest. When I started college and you insisted on helping with my supplies, even though I knew you were stretched thin. It was my choice, I interrupted. It always was. I know that now. But in my confused teenage head, I started to think you were sacrificing yourself out of obligation, not love. And that just ate away at me. We put the baking sheet in the oven and sat down to wait. The smell of cinnamon already filled the entire kitchen. When I started pulling away, she continued, part of me thought I was doing you a favor, freeing you from a responsibility, that you could finally live your life without worrying about me. Oh, Riles, I sighed, finally grasping the complexity of her thoughts. You were never a responsibility. You are one of the greatest joys of my life. Even when I was difficult, even when I canceled plans last minute, even when I barely replied to your texts, even then, I confirmed. Love isn't a switch you flip on and off based on behavior. It's a constant light, even when clouds obscure the sky. She smiled, a sad but genuine smile. I guess that's why I took it out on you that day, because I knew, deep down, your love would withstand even that. That you were the only safe harbor that would never crumble, no matter the storm. And even so, I hurt you, she concluded, her head bowed. The oven timer chimed, announcing the cookies were ready. I got up to take them out, feeling the comforting warmth when I opened the oven door. You know, Riley, I said as I placed the baking sheet on the table. When your mom, Clara, was about 7, she broke a vase that had belonged to my grandmother. It was a family heirloom, the only thing I'd brought from my parents' house. Riley watched me intently as I continued. She was so terrified she hid the pieces under her bed and didn't tell me. I only found out days later when I went to clean her room. When I confronted her, she cried so hard I thought she was going to pass out. What did you do? Riley asked, curious. I sat with her, dried her tears, and said, Clara, broken things can be fixed or replaced. Relationships broken by lies are much harder to mend. I picked up a still warm cookie, blowing on it lightly. What you said hurt me deeply, Riley. I won't lie. But what would hurt me more is losing you. Losing our connection. Because of words said in a moment of desperation. I offered her the cookie, which she took carefully. We'll rebuild, one day at a time. Like these cookies. Simple ingredients that together create something special. She bit into the cookie and closed her eyes, just like she did as a child. Still magical, she whispered. In the following weeks, Riley and I established a new routine. Nothing forced, nothing out of obligation. She'd visit Sundays when she could. Sometimes an hour, sometimes all day. We'd talk about everything. Med school, her fears, my memories, our dreams. A month after that Sunday of reconciliation, she called me on a Wednesday night. Grandma, you got a minute? Of course, Riles. What's up? I passed my makeup exams, she said, her voice thick with emotion. Both of them. Not with flying colors, but I passed. I'm so proud of you, I replied, my heart swelling with joy. But that's not all, she continued. I started therapy, twice a week. Oh, Riles, that's wonderful. My therapist said I have severe imposter syndrome, mixed with anxiety. We're working on it. We talked for almost an hour. She told me about her therapy sessions, about learning to handle the pressure, to separate her worth as a person from her academic achievements. You know what else really helped, Grandma? She asked before we hung up. What, sweetie? That talk about Clara breaking the vase, about how relationships are harder to fix than objects. I told my therapist, and she said it was a powerful lesson. I smiled, remembering that distant day with little Clara in my arms. Sometimes, the most important lessons are the simplest, Riles. Like making snickerdoodles, she replied, and I could hear the smile in her voice. 6 months passed since that Sunday. Riley's still in med school, still facing pressures and challenges. But something fundamental had shifted. She wasn't carrying it all alone anymore. Last week, I got an unexpected call from her. Grandma, can you do me a favor? Of course, Riles. What do you need? Can you teach me your vegetable soup? I've got friends here studying for finals, and I thought it'd be comforting. I smiled, feeling a wave of warmth wash over me. Of course I can. Want me to write down the recipe and text it to you? Actually, she hesitated. I was wondering if you could come over and we could make it together, if it's not too much trouble. My eyes welled, not with sadness, but a deep, quiet joy. No trouble at all, Riles. I'll be right over. When I got to her apartment, I was greeted not with awkwardness or impatience, but a tight hug. Her friends were in the living room, books and notebooks scattered. Guys, she announced, this is my grandma Deborah, the best cook in the world, and the person who taught me love doesn't come with conditions. We made the soup together, chatting and laughing in her small kitchen. Her friends popped in every now and then, curious about the smell wafting through the apartment. Your grandma's amazing, one friend commented. Now I see where you get your strength. Riley looked at me and smiled, not the polite, distant smile of the last few years, but the genuine smile of my Riles. Yeah, she really is amazing, she agreed, and I took way too long to see it. Later, as we all sat eating the soup, I watched my granddaughter interacting with her friends. I saw how relaxed she was, how authentic, how she laughed without holding back, admitted when she didn't know something, accepted help. When I was leaving, she walked me to the bus stop. "Thanks for coming, Grandma. It was important for me to introduce you to my real friends, not the ones who were here that day." "We don't need to talk about that," I gently interrupted. "Yes, we do," she insisted. "Because I want you to know those people weren't my real friends. Just acquaintances I pretended to be someone I'm not with. Perfect, unshakable, always in control." She held my hands, her eyes fixed on mine. "These ones today? They really know me. Know my struggles, my flaws. Accept me even with bad grades or panic attacks. I'm happy you found your place, Riles. And you know what else?" she continued. "I told them about what I said to you that day, about how I treated you. You know what they said?" I shook my head, curious. "That I was lucky to have a grandma who loved me enough to forgive. That most relationships would have ended right there, with that terrible sentence." The bus was approaching, its lights cutting through the night. "You taught me the most important lesson of my life, Grandma," she said, hugging me one last time. "True love isn't about perfection. It's about forgiveness, starting over, and snickerdoodles on tough days. I learned that day that family love isn't always a safe harbor. Sometimes it's a storm, with strong winds and high waves. But if you hold on, the calm always returns. And when it does, it brings something new. A deeper understanding, a truer connection. I'm no longer the perfect grandma in her eyes, nor she the perfect granddaughter in mine. Just two imperfect people who, despite harsh words and tough times, chose to keep loving each other. Yesterday I got a text from her, a picture of a batch of snickerdoodles she'd made herself. "They're not as good as yours," the message read. "I think they're missing the secret ingredient." I smiled and replied, "Love's never missing, Riles. It just changes form as we grow." This morning, while I was tidying up some old drawers, I found a drawing Riley made when she was 6. A simple figure of two people holding hands, one big, one small, with a huge heart between them. Underneath, in shaky child's handwriting, it read, "Grandma and Riley forever." I put the drawing up on the kitchen wall, next to the family photos, because now I understand that forever doesn't mean without conflict or pain. It means choosing to stay, choosing to rebuild, choosing to love, even when words hurt, even when the path is hard. And that, in the end, is all that truly matters.